Hi, everyone. Adnan here. Welcome back to a summer edition of Digital Health on Air. And I'm super excited to be joined by Linta Mustafa. She is the all-star co-founder and CEO at Vitract. She has been building this amazing company here over the past few years. So we're super excited to have her to really help us understand and shed some light on an incredibly important topic, which is gut microbiome, gut health, but gut microbiome testing in particular, alongside the relevant education that all of us need to be good, healthy people and patients. And so today, Linta will share more about the links between healthcare consumers who are now more empowered with data, gut wellness, and of course, how this all comes together in terms of traditional healthcare. So welcome, Linta.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this chat. I can talk about gut health any day and all day, so I'm excited to get into it.
Awesome. Well, as I've shared with you, our audience is super diverse, ranges far and wide, but there is definitely a large contingent of folks from traditional healthcare, the health systems, executives, clinic network executives, etc. So I'll ask you some questions that will be super relevant to them. But let's start with the big picture and story. You're a founder, which is always nice for me to have a fellow founder on the podcast here. But talk to us about like the company, why you started it, where the product is today, how the testing works, all the magic.
Yeah. So I kind of fell into this through a personal experience. A little bit of background on myself. I am a former varsity wrestler. I wrestled for a very long time. I was always active, doing a ton of sports. But in college, I was a varsity wrestler, and I woke up one day and I had all this inflammation in the joints of my hands specifically. I couldn't figure out what it was. I went to see the doctor on campus, and long story short, they said, this is something autoimmune in nature. I mean, I was so young at the time. I didn't even know what that meant. I went to see a rheumatologist, and they went back and forth between, oh, maybe it's lupus, maybe it's RA. It was so early, they couldn't really get me a diagnosis at all. And so my options for treatment were very limited, and they really were in the set of suppressing symptoms and suppressing the immune system. And at the time, I was pre-med. I was doing a specialization in genetics. And so I could get through a research paper pretty quickly. So because this issue was so top of mind for me at the moment, I just went down this internet rabbit hole of reading research papers and trying to figure out what is out there in the science behind autoimmune illness. And all of that led me to learning more about the gut microbiome, and even the basic facts of 70% of our immune cells are actually housed in the gut. Was so surprised that this never came up in any of my rheumatology appointments. So all of that led me to finding a functional medicine doc. This is about 10 years ago. So functional medicine wasn't this as popularized as it is today. So it was hard to find. And then ultimately that practitioner worked with me to heal my gut over a span of 7 to 8 months. That completely reversed my inflammation, got me off all of my meds, and I've been completely healthy since. So really changed the trajectory of my life. And I think what that experience did for me was it made me realize that gut microbiome science wasn't just a nice to have, but actually an essential. That should be a part of our screening. It should be a tool that practitioners should be using. And then I started wrestling with this idea of why is that not the case today? So, it's a very complex issue. The gut microbiome is very complex. There's a ton of science now, but that also makes it very complex into how do we translationally make this applicable. So I started working on this, and we realized the biggest entry point for us would be starting with how do we look at the gut? So we started sort of in the diagnostic space, and it's been, we've had our test now in the market for a year. We're partnered with hundreds of practices, and it's been really cool to see sort of this vision come to life.
So thank you for sharing your journey and story, and clearly you were ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, and ahead of the game. You were an empowered healthcare consumer more than a decade ago, and from a very young age. I'm going to ask you two separate questions. One, you touched upon it, but why isn't gut microbiome and gut health like built into traditional healthcare today, right? Like, why is it viewed more as wellness and not part and parcel of traditional health? Like, let's start there, and then I'll ask you more about being an empowered healthcare consumer. But like, why isn't it just part of how we are treated today?
Yeah, it's funny. We almost got there 12 years ago with the rise of uBiome. They raised over $100 million, and they built this amazing technology. And I think it was just a function of the sort of inner workings of that company, sort of the massive crash of that company. And it kind of set the entire category back by a decade. Investors didn't want to touch the space, but it didn't hold back the science. So the funding kept going to the science. the literature kept piling up, but it wasn't really going to the companies just because there was so much money funded into this one company that, massively sort of blew up with insurance fraud and all these other things. And so I think it was just like a space that was set back. Fortunately, because of such a strong demand from consumers post-pandemic for wellness, for everything integrative and holistic care, it's come back. That funding has come back, that interest has come back, and now companies like ours sort of get a chance to just take that science and build it into real products. I think the other thing is that there isn't really a standardization the same way that we've seen in other tools. So
Totally.
there's a standardization in blood testing, in MRIs, and CT scans, and there's no really standardization as of today in what a healthy microbiome looks like. And I think that has really held back mass adoption of gut microbiome testing. And that's one of the things that we really focus on addressing as a company is in the situation where there's no standardization, how do you actually prove to practitioners that what you're doing is evidence-based? And so, we can get all into that, but we've done a ton of things from data scraping, from case studies, from research studies, to sort of like this open source model that we have in our test results. We open up all of the literature that back up our claims. So we've done a lot of things to optimize for opening up that veil and showing the science behind our work.
Awesome. Okay, this is super helpful. So a decade's worth of now like foundational research, good science, the barriers of healthcare that are the barriers of healthcare, i.e., like no standards today have really been a hindrance. You've been in the market, on the market, real people using your test. You're clearly an evangelist. You're kind of building a new paradigm. You're building upon the science. You're building the standards. Talk to us about the healthcare consumer, right? Like that's a newer thing. People have been writing about it and talking about it forever, ever since I think Dr. Topol kind of said, wrote the book, The Doctor Will See You Now. But we're now in a period where an empowered, educated healthcare consumer is very real. And so how do you contribute to, information that patients have and will hopefully use for life improvements and potentially therapeutic intervention? But there's all this information out there about health, but gut health in particular, from your friends, from TikTok, from blogs you're reading. Like, how do you help people, like your end user, make sense of it all?
Yeah, I think cutting through the noise in wellness is becoming harder and harder. So one of the things that we did to get to the most high affinity users who really, like me a decade ago, were doing all their research and then learning that actually for me to be able to vet some of these products is really, really challenging, if not almost virtually impossible. So those high affinity users are actually going to practitioners who have a lot of influence in this space. So they're either finding a naturopath near them or a dietitian near them or a functional oncologist near them. So, they're finding the practitioners and the voices that are helping them sort of vet through what has credible science behind it and what doesn't. So we found that to be the most effective way to get to those consumers is partner with those voices to get the message out.
Okay, super helpful. I want to stay on this in terms of people who are interested in understanding their health, interested in understanding their gut health, the theme of wellness. So people want to be healthy, they want to live better lives, but often that's now comes with some skepticism, right, of traditional healthcare. And so how are you at Vitract really helping bridge that gap to like a more holistic approach to care that still incorporates like the expertise of traditional medicine and allows people to actually be on a care journey that leads to a positive outcome, whatever a positive outcome might mean for that person?
Yeah. One of our ethos as a company is because of the complexity of gut microbiome science, it's really important to have a practitioner in a mix. Now, it doesn't matter if that practitioner is an MD or if they're a dietitian or they're a specialty or a type provider, that doesn't matter. What matters is they're able to understand and grasp tools that they can then share out to their clients. And so one of the ways that we sort of focus on bridging that gap between sort of traditional care and integrative care is sticking true to the science. So if we have a product that we're comfortable putting in front of any type of practitioner because we can defend the science behind it, I think that's how we sort of bridge the gap between those two worlds. And I think that we're seeing that so much more now with the rise of longevity clinics. Majority are MD run. The rise of concierge medicine, one of our biggest consumer subsets is those concierge practitioners. And I think that to me is a perfect model of MD saying, okay, I've already been using the tools that I've been using for a long time that I'm comfortable with, but now I'm going to start to bring in new tools and sort of deliver that care in the same setting, but with upgraded tools.
Yeah. Okay, this is great. And talk to me about just building patient trust. Like what do you see working? How are folks your end customers are the patient, but your customers are ultimately these clinic groups, longevity clinics, nutritionists, other healthcare providers. Like how are they building trust with the patient?
Yeah. I think one of the most important things is for practitioners to be able to communicate to their clients what they're really looking for in the results. Um, to this day, even with all this science and all this literature, we don't make overreaching claims. We're not going to make diagnoses for certain things. And I'll even say we never define what a healthy microbiome looks like, because a healthy microbiome for you and for me could look very different. And so
Totally.
what we do is we find signatures of a healthy microbiome. So focusing on diversity, what are the most important biomarkers for type 2 diabetes, for menopause, for perimenopause, for oncology, for different forms of cancers, and then getting all that great information and then making the provider comfortable with it. And once they're comfortable with it, then they can share it with the consumer in the most simple terms, but then the consumer can understand, okay, I know that you know what you're doing with this tool and you know what you're looking for. So equipping the provider with the right information is super important because it is a very complex topic.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I'm going to ask you about patient education because I think that's where you're going ultimately here. But I want you to put on like Professor Mustafa hat now. I got my test here. Like I'm a noob, right? Just break it down for us in terms of like how does gut health influence overall wellness? There's been a lot of education recently on links between gut health and women's health, specifically menopause, but it impacts so many different parts of our well-being. Like you experienced it directly with your personal story, but like just break it down for us in terms of gut health and how does it hit and touch upon wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the simplest of terms, you have what we do in the lab. I'll start with what we do in the lab and sort of what we're looking for, and then how your lifestyle and everything you do, how that influences health. So the way it works is you have that kit, you're going to collect your sample, which is a stool sample, you're going to send it back to our lab, and our lab will tell us everything that we picked up in your gut. So all the bacteria, all the parasites, if they're there, viruses, candida, fungi, basically anything with genetic material that was in your gut, all of that information will be picked up by these advanced genomics techniques and given back to us. Now, what we do with that information is we try to figure out now what is most important for a certain client. And I think the second part of this question was pulling out which areas of health that are
Yeah,
most
like
affected.
just I'm gonna use this guy. I'm gonna get my results, but what should I be looking at? And I realize it'll be different for everyone, but gut
Yeah.
health impacts what parts of health and my
Yeah.
total wellness.
Yeah. So the simplest way to put it is what you eat is a direct factor in what lives in the gut, because
Yep.
different bacteria and different things like to feed on different foods. So you're directly influencing the colonies of bugs that live in your gut. Now, based on what lives in your gut decides what metabolites, what enzymes, what neurotransmitters, what B vitamins, what short chain fatty acids, what is being produced is all decided upon what is living there. So that's kind of like in simple terms how that loop works.
Awesome.
Now, a lot of these, majority of our immune system is in our gut. A lot of our
Hmm.
neurotransmitters are produced in our gut, and then they actually travel up to the brain. There's this whole new class of science around the astrobilome, which is basically these class of bugs that play a key role in how much free-flowing estrogen is actually circulating within the blood. Gut bacteria actually activate our body's natural GLP-1 response, which is key for type 2 diabetes, weight
Totally.
loss. So all of these downstream actions are directly signaled by what bugs are living in your gut.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for nerding out with me and taking us deeper into the science. And actually, you did a fantastic job of just explaining it in simple terms where even this guy got it. But now I want you to put kind of CEO Linta hat back on. Look, you're working to change hearts and minds in the established healthcare world. If you had a magic wand, like your audience here are a lot of healthcare administrators and executives, like what are the things that you want to see to make sure that gut health becomes a part and parcel of our overall like treatment paradigm and the way we think of people's wellness?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think gut health plays a key role in preventative care. And I think where we are today, we know how important and consequential gut health actually is. Now, I think the work from here on forward that we're going to be doing at Vitract is partnering with practitioners, with healthcare systems to figure out the best ways to implement these tests into the way that care is delivered today. They can be used as screening tools, they can be used as monitoring tools, and downstream, there's also a ton of science proving that doing this kind of work can save tons of time and effort in actually treating a patient that has a much more advanced condition that could have been caught much earlier or treated much earlier by looking at their gut microbiome. There's also the idea of adjunctive therapy. So if you have a certain client on chemotherapy or you have them on, different biologics, well, some of the biggest side effects of these drugs are GI upset, and we can get a direct look into those things if we can look at your gut. So I think the application there's tons of different ways that we can roll this out, but we're starting by focusing on the most high acuity type patients.
Awesome. Okay, let's go back to the science a bit. You guys just expanded your testing capabilities to offer a test called Deep Gut. Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so our first test was bacteria only, which 96% of your gut is bacteria. Deep gut is more advanced in the sense that it can pick up genetic material from bacteria and beyond. So if you have any type of viruses living there, it can give you a sense of viral load, parasites, fungi. So think about anything with genetic material, deep gut can pick up, which makes it a really, really powerful tool.
Awesome. Okay, I know you and I were trading notes on kind of different approaches to gut health testing in advance of our episode here today. One, thank you for your leadership in this space, right? Gut health is clearly an important part of wellness, and it's still growing as a discipline, as a field. It's awesome to see that Vitract is empowering consumers with real research, with more enhanced testing with data to take informed actions in terms of their own health. You've chosen to work directly with care delivery organizations as opposed to going directly to consumers. Talk about the why there and really how you expect the healthcare industry, because that's who you're working with directly, to really approach or change their approach to gut health here over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think the math that we did there was the average consumer, even though, even we've seen this with gym cycling, they see a huge uptick in motivation at the start of the year, but it fizzles and it wanes. And with the gut microbiome, because it's so complex, it takes a couple months of continued behavioral change, continued sort of intervention to actually move the needle. And so we did a ton of initial testing and brainstorming around, are consumers able to do that completely by themselves, where they can take a test and then they can do this regimented protocol and then retest and really measure if the needle is moving? I think that subset of consumers is very small. And so we believe that by bringing practitioners into the mix, they can help sort of act as a coach, act as a guide, and as field domain expert in helping the client get to that goal much faster and much more efficiently. So that's why we decided to really focus on the practitioner. And I think with the practitioner, the main thing that we're focused on is giving them the right education. Because different practitioners are going to look for different things in these tests. So equipping them with the right tools to make that interpretation and that protocol creation really simple and easy makes it a simple add-on into their practice.
Awesome. Linta, this has been awesome. Thank you for sharing your time with me and your expertise with our audience. Again, huge thanks to you for sharing your time with us, but most importantly for just your leadership in this space. Excited to see this new discipline be created and for you guys to really be not just at the cutting edge of the science, but also in terms of changing the way that we as people and consumers think of gut health and the way providers and practitioners enable their patients to incorporate gut health into their life and to lead the lives that they want to lead. So this has been awesome. You've really kind of expanded our scope and horizon beyond just kind of healthcare operations. So a really thoughtful episode here and one of my favorite ones. So thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Linta.
Bye.
Bye.